2021 was a hell of a year when it came to fraud. We're talking about PPP loans, EIDL, unemployment, disability, you name it, all sorts of fraud was going on. So in this video, I want to go over a fraud recap and predictions for 2022 that was put out by my guy Frank from frankonfraud.com. He has an amazing blog over there where he talks about different fraud things that are going on in the news and a lot of very important information that you could get on different fraud techniques. So I need you to go check out his blog. But in this video, we're going to recap this article that he made going over the fraud trends of 2021 and what he's predicting for 2022. So let's not waste no time. If you find value in the video, I need you to hit the like button and also subscribe to the channel so you can catch more of my content. And also make sure you check out my guy Frank from frankonfraud.com. So let's get right into it. Hundreds of thousands of new fraudsters have been activated. The fact is, we created hundreds of thousands of new fraudsters and scammers, if not millions, over the last 18 months. We created financial pressures where they were desperate. We pushed trillions of stimulus money piles for them to take, and then we let social media platforms train them or recruit them into the dark world of fraud. So fraud always happens, but what made 2021 pretty unique is the way that social media influenced and trained so many people on how to pull off these fraud schemes because it was so easy. You've seen it all over Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, whatever social media, Telegram, that's the biggest one. You have all these hidden message boards and groups where these guys are just freely talking about these scams and how they're taking advantage of it. And the crazy thing is, with the amount of people who are pulling these scams off, it makes you wonder, will they all get caught? Some people say no. If you ask me, I think eventually you're going to get caught. But that's not neither here nor there. Let's keep it moving. So the first point of trends in 2021 was stimulus fraud mushroomed to 242 billion as benefits abuse worsened. Fast fraud equals fast money, and no money was faster or easier than stimulus money again in 2021. If anything, PPP fraud got even worse in 2021, with new fintech entrants being blamed for enabling fraud rates as high as 15%, while they just sat back and collected those juicy fees, billions of dollars in fees. So tons of these fintech companies came into the space in order to help these businesses that were struggling and needed these taxpayer dollars to stay afloat. But these fintech companies also made it extremely easy for fraudsters to pull off fraud. And you can see here the rates are bananas. It's like a zoo, straight bananas. PPP loan coming in at 15% fraud rate. EIDL program coming in at 40%. And the unemployment benefits coming in at 10% fraud rate. So fraudsters were making money last year. It was really a profitable year to be a fraudster last year. I'm just saying. The second point for 2021, identity theft soared to $56 billion, a 300% increase over prior years. Perhaps not surprisingly, but certainly jarring, identity theft estimates soared. In March, Javelin estimated that identity theft losses had increased over 300%, driven largely by stimulus-related fraud and scams. So it goes without saying, there was tons of identity theft as people were getting their profiles and their information stolen for people to submit these fraudulent PPP loan applications or unemployment applications. And people are just getting notification that, hey, you applied for this loan. And they're like, what? I didn't apply for any loan. I don't even have a business. But it's the scammers and fraudsters stealing that information. So identity theft was definitely on fire in 2021. The third point for 2021, SCR filings will likely hit a record of 4 million for the year as fraud reports climbed to the highest ever. By October, SCR filings to FinCEN indicated that from a reporting perspective, 2021 was going to be another record-breaking year. SCRs are estimated to hit 4 million by the end of the year, another 8% increase in reported fraud over last year. So in case you don't know what a SAR is, that's called a suspicious activity report. And that's something that financial institutions submit whenever they suspect something that they're doing with a client or a transaction that they see might be suspicious. So this clearly indicates that financial institutions were reporting a ton of fraud and things that they just felt, this doesn't look right. But if you think about the way the nation was last year, it was tons of pressure with race and politics. It created a sticky situation for you to even question somebody, because automatically they could jump and say, hey, it's a race thing or you're discriminating against me. So banks just really had the option to submit SARs, give out the money, and just take the loss. Even though it's fraud, you really can't touch it. But it's kind of crazy when you think about it. Point number 4 for 2021, bots emerged, wreaking havoc and ushering in a new era of fraud automation. And 2021 ushered in a whole new level of social engineering tools designed to make fraud easier for those hundreds and thousands of new fraudsters that entered the scene. In June, OTP bot services began to appear, which completely automated the pilfering of OTP passcodes from victims with zero human-to-human interaction. So, no secret, tons of bot services are out there, which makes the process of stealing your OTP pins extremely easy. You get a text message, you panic. Just at that same time, you get an automated call. You're not thinking about it. You think it's your bank. You automatically reply because you just so happen to get a code at the same time. You put that pin in, just like that. You just gave your personal information away to a scammer, and they're gonna have their way with your bank account, Zelle, ACH transfers, you name it. They're gonna do whatever they want with your account. And these bots just automated that entire process for them. That was a real big theme in 2021. Point number 5 for 2021. As scams and fraud proliferated in 2021, the government stepped in. The CFPB released a FAQ on electronic fund transfers that clarified their position that more consumers needed to be reimbursed for scams. It marked the beginning of the end where banks can hold consumers liable for all scams. So in the past, before all these scams came out, banks would view things in a way where, hey, if you were reckless or negligent with your information, it's tough you got scammed, but that's on you. You got to protect your info. But the CFPB, which is the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which is pretty much a bureau that oversees financial institutions, they released this FAQ on Reg E, which pretty much is a regulation that's all about electronic transfers. So you're talking about deposits, electronic cash app, all that good stuff. And one of the points I found the most interesting is negligence by customers, such as writing their PIN number on the back of their card, cannot be used to hold the customer liable. So a classic fraud move is, I lost my debit card and, oh, what do you know? My PIN number was also there. Silly me. And they picked up my card, used my PIN, and deposited fake checks. Like, really? If you write your PIN on your card, I'm sorry. If you lose it, you kind of deserve to have your money stolen. The whole point of a PIN is a number that you can memorize. So do not put your PIN in your card. In the past, banks would say, hey, you were negligent with your information. You shouldn't have done that. We can't approve this claim that you're making. But now, according to this, if you use that excuse, it seems like you should be able to get your money back. Another thing I found interesting is banks cannot require consumers to file police reports before beginning their investigations. That was another thing. For instance, if you got your identity stolen and someone was able to get into your account and do all sorts of stuff, a bank would require you to get a police report to file with the precinct in order to make it legit that this actually happened before they would continue their investigation. But now, banks cannot require that, and they must proceed with the investigation. All these things is just making it easier for scammers and fraudsters to do their thing, but it's also in the same vein of helping consumers have an easier time of dealing with all these frauds that was going on in 2021. So with that being said, that's a nice recap of the year 2021. Let's move into 2022 and see what Frank thinks are some of the predictions that are going to happen in this coming year, or in this year that we're in now. Time is flying. Let's get right into it. Prediction number 1, synthetic identity fraud with deeper and better fakes and expansion to synthetic businesses. Synthetic identities will continue to grow and keep its reputation as America's fastest growing financial crime. Virtually every financial institution is grappling with synthetic identity because the fakes are getting better and more convincing. In 2021, identity theft proved Identity thieves proved they could defeat driver's license checks with realistic looking masks. They proved they could fake their credit history with virtually undetectable fake trade lines. And they were given a plethora of online tools such as generated.photos to create endless arrays of fake images for identities. In 2022, synthetic identity fraud will only get better, with fraudsters leveraging a variety of techniques, which include using CPNs aged for 24 to 36 months to appear more legitimate, so more use of CPNs, which are pretty much fake profiles that they create, and then they create this fake identity by applying for different credit cards and things of that nature. Next, use of real high-value trade lines such as mortgages and high-limit personal loans to bolster credit history. So really making these fake credit profiles look legit by using mortgages underneath them and really building it up and just creating a fake identity all the way. Using third-party public record tools, the same search tools banks and investigators use to identify true non-issued social security numbers, which will make detection more difficult. So there you have it. These fraudsters are using the same approval tools and research tools that banks are using to see if a social security number is real. So they could test countless numbers and eventually create a library of a ton of numbers that are clear and easy for them to fake and have their way with it. Leveraging more realistic driver's license, social security cards, and other supporting documents. So once again, it's getting easier for them to fake these documents and pass by these automated security processes that these fintech companies are using. And lastly, using computer-generated synthetic faces for documentation and selfies. And you have this picture here that's mind-blowing. All these beautiful faces, and none of them are real. This is all AI, and fraudsters are going to definitely take advantage of this to bypass security checks online where they ask you to upload your ID and different things of that nature. So you can see these fraudsters are really getting advanced. So these, financial institutions, the government, we got to step it up. Let's keep it going. Prediction number 2, government agencies are compelled to deal with identity theft fraud once and for all. You can only blame fraudsters when you're getting crushed with fraud for so long, and government agencies are at the breaking point now. They got to get involved. The federal and state governments are now largely to blame for the dramatic rise in identity theft fraud here in the US because they cannot get their act together in controlling fraud. Millions of US citizens are being defrauded because of their systems to control fraud simply do not work. And we saw it with the PPP loan. How in the world were all these people able to just apply for this and just get free money within days? Within days, it clearly shows they got to step it up with their security controls. In 2022, you will see a concerted effort by fraud solution vendors and taxpayers to compel the US government to stop fraud once and for all. I believe that they will be successful. So as more and more fraud is going on and taxpayer money is just going to these fraudsters, people are going to start to complain, and it's going to force the government to step it up and really put some regulations in place to make this fraud a lot harder for these scammers to do. Prediction number 3, extent of fintech fraud comes to light and forces more prudent controls. P2P apps, neobanks, and small business lending platforms experienced meteoric growth in 2021, but with fast money comes fast fraud. And with these new fintech players, there's a ton of fast fraud. And Chime, Cash App, Zelle, all these things is fraudsters' toolbox for them to pull off their scams. We believe 2022 is the year that the extent of that fraud comes to light and forces some of these fintechs to adopt more prudent fraud controls. Because face it, the current level of fraud on their platforms is an unsustainable business model. They got to get this under control. And some of these changes may not be voluntary. With Congress investigating the outsized role that fintech lending platforms played in the $76 billion PPP loan fraud debacle, you can bet that change is certainly imminent. Congress is getting involved. They're investigating all these PPP loan applications that was fraud, and they're wondering, how in the world did these companies allow this to happen? So they're going to clamp down on them. You had lending platforms, ton of fraud on there, saying 9 out of 10 PPP lenders with the highest suspicious PPP fraud was from fintechs. Then you got the PPP, the P2P apps, the money transferring apps, ton of fraud on there. And then also the neobanks, Chime, I'm looking at you. So much fraud on these banks because it was the security controls just wasn't there. So fraudsters were having their way with it. Prediction number 4, governments will push banks to take on more liability for scammed customers. And I know fraudsters are gonna love this one. And also shout out to the money mules. There has been a seismic shift in scams here in the US, and 1 in 5 consumers is targeted by phone scammers alone. In 2021, scam calls increased again by over 100%. T-Mobile tracks scam calls on their network and are logging an astounding 2.5 billion scams calls a month. It's a numbers game. Believe me, if you're doing 2.5 billion calls and these things are automated now, you're gonna get a lot of people. A lot of people are gonna fall for that. With so much impact on consumers, you can bet the government is going to continue to push banks to do more to reimburse victims of scams. The CFPB got the ball rolling from the FAQ that we saw earlier last year, but you can expect the trend to gain more steam this year. Banks will need to formulate a comprehensive strategy to stay in compliance in 2022. And now when you talk about banks sticking to compliance, they don't play with that. You getting the CFPB involved, you getting the OCC involved. Immediately banks are going to do what they have to do to get it together because they're not trying to have fines. Prediction number 5 for 2022. Fraudster automation will rapidly accelerate, turning newbies into experts instantly. Now get this, the fraud as a service industry, this is a new term I'm hearing, fraud as a service, is still in its infancy, but is growing exponentially as expert fraudsters and scammers turn their attention to selling methods, services, and fraud perpetrating tech to others. So now these fraudsters are just creating a business of just selling the methods to others. You know the terms method, wave, this is the new drip, I don't know. It's tons of fraud terms out there, and now they just selling these methods to others. Professional refunding services, BEC as a service, business email compromise as a service, buy for you, were initial fraud services that all required professional services from the seller. But with the advent of OTP bots in the last 6 months, we are now seeing more automating tools being sold in the market. In 2022, we predict the development and deployment of these automated fraud services will accelerate. They may even begin to incorporate AI to make them smarter, more targeted, and more human-like. These automated bots could include account opening bots, loan application bots, credential stuffing bots, and new hyper-realistic social engineering text and chat bots. Now, a lot of people might say, man, I'll never fall for a bot, yada, 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 but you might not fall for it, but the thousands of other people who get this. Imagine your grandma, your grandpa, your uncle, your aunt who just got a smartphone and figuring out how to use it. They might get this and fall for these scams. So you can't just think about yourself. You got to think about your family, your loved ones. We got to educate them on these new bots and scams that's out there and let them know how to handle it if they were ever to get one of these messages or have one of these methods try and be used on them. And now the final prediction, which is prediction number 7, I want to call out. Digital transformation trend is going to burn new entrants. 97% of banks and lenders have digital transformation projects afoot to move their services and products online. While this is great news for their consumers, the move online is fraught with fraud, risk, and these banks and lenders may not fully comprehend. Traditional banks, credit unions, auto lenders, and mortgage lenders are good examples of the type of companies that have traditionally relied on non-digital processes to onboard new customers and originate new loans and products. As these lenders and banks launch their online portals, there's a very high chance that many will get burned with unexpected fraud. In fact, they may have little experience with the velocity or sophistication of attacks that will come as soon as they go live. They will experience higher levels of identity theft, synthetic identity, exploitation of application process, and account takeover attempts. So pretty much a lot of these traditional companies, They're going digital. They're trying to get onto the new wave of how things are done online, automated. And with that, they're going to learn the hard way when these fraudsters tap in and take advantage of all the holes and loopholes in their system. And with that, it's going to be a lot of fraud. It's going to be a lot of loss. And the fraudsters are going to be really happy. I definitely agree with this point for 2022. So we got to look out for it. So now, just to summarize the whole article, each of the predictions that Frank came up with is based on the same premise. First, fraud is always going to be in new, fast-growing products and services. Second, fraud will always follow the fast money. Third, tomorrow's fraud is always the same as today's fraud, just with a twist. And I'll add a fourth, the one that I always say, fast money leaves just as fast as it comes. So if you made it this far, I appreciate you for checking out the recap. Would love to know your thoughts, your comments. Was anything left out? How do you think it's going to be in 2022? What's the new wave that's going on in fraud? I would love to know your thoughts. If you found value in the video, please hit that like button. Also, make sure you check out my guy Frank on Fraud's website, frankonfraud.com, so you can get more information and you can check out the article on your own. But with that being said, let's have a great 2022. Peace.